July 12, 1941. The stench of diesel and scorched earth hangs low over the shattered terraces of Odessa. A thin wind carries dust, cigarette ash and the metallic bite of gun oil through a ruined courtyard where a single silhouette keeps vigil. Senior Sergeant Lyudmila Pavlichenko sits hunched behind a collapsed wall, her breath fogging in the cool morning air as she levels a Mosin, Nagant fitted with a PU scope. Her gloved cheek presses to wood darkened by sweat, faint notches carved into the stock count victories that make no sound. Shell blasts drum in the distance. Men shuffle, mechanics, infantry, dispatch riders, voices clipped, radios crackling in Russian. Lyudmila's world narrows to a single square of glass and a glint 200 meters away. A German sentry adjusting his helmet beside a ruined water tank. She exhales, squeezes the match of her finger against the trigger, and the rifle answers with a dry report. The sentry folds. Nearby, a radio operator, Private Ivanov, glances at her, eyes equal parts awe and something like fear. Across the lines, the German officers are methodical, confident in their maps and telescopes. They will not yet know the name tied to the disappearance of their men. They will not know the ledger that the Soviets keep, an invisible ledger written in careful script and tally marks on the inside of a boot sole. Here, in this courtyard, Lyudmila keeps her records close. Folded scrap paper listing dates, locations, and the small, terrible arithmetic of survival. Before the war, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was not a soldier. She was a quiet history student at Kiev University. Sharp-minded, competitive, with a streak of pride that often got her into trouble. She joined a local shooting club after overhearing a boy boast that women can't aim, and within months she was outscoring every man on the range. Her precision wasn't born of rage. It was born of focus. Every pull of the trigger was deliberate, calm, unflinching. When Hitler's forces invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, she left her studies and enlisted immediately. At the recruitment station, the officer laughed when she asked for a rifle. "We need nurses, not girls with guns," he sneered. Lyudmila said nothing. She simply opened her satchel and placed her shooting medals on the table one by one. The laughter stopped. Weeks later, she was assigned to the 25th Rifle Division, stationed near Odessa. Her comrades were skeptical, until they saw her crawl through the rubble under machine gun fire to retrieve a wounded man, then return to her post and eliminate 2 German scouts seconds later. By the end of her first week, she had 12 confirmed kills. Each shot was logged in a small brown notebook: date, location, wind direction, rank of the target. She wasn't chasing numbers. She was building a rhythm, a kind of cold mathematics. The frontline officers began whispering her name with respect, and the Germans began to notice their missing men. May 1942. The coastal fortress city of Sevastopol burns under the constant roar of Luftwaffe bombers. The sky itself seems to shudder. Dust and fire rain down through streets once filled with schoolchildren and fruit vendors. Now, the air smells only of cordite, sweat, and salt from the Black Sea. Lyudmila Pavlichenko moves through the wreckage like a ghost, silent, efficient, face streaked with grime and gunpowder. Her Mosin Nagant feels like an extension of her body now. She sets up in the upper floor of a shattered building overlooking a German advance route. The building trembles as artillery hammers nearby, but she doesn't flinch. Through her scope, she spots movement, a Wehrmacht officer giving hand signals behind a knocked-out Panzer. The crosshairs rest gently on his chest. A breath in, a breath out. Crack. The officer collapses, his field glasses clattering into the dust. 2 medics rush forward. Crack. Another falls. Lyudmila shifts position, slides a fresh round into the chamber, and fades back into the shadows before countersnipers can locate her muzzle flash. Her commander radios in later that evening. Confirmed, 8 kills today. She simply nods. No celebration. No emotion. Her kill count now exceeds 250. Among the Soviet ranks, her legend spreads. Lady Death, the Germans whisper, the woman who stalks them from the ruins. But the cost grows heavier. Friends vanish under shellfire. Rations dwindle. The nights are filled with coughing, nightmares, and the endless scratch of pencils tallying the dead. Yet still, Lyudmila hunts, methodical, relentless, until Sevastopol itself begins to crumble beneath her boots. June 1942. The Germans finally breach Sevastopol's outer defenses. Soviet units are splintered and retreating through smoke-choked ravines. Lyudmila's position is hit by mortar fire. Stone and glass cascade over her as she dives behind a wall, clutching her rifle. A fragment tears through her left shoulder. Pain blooms, hot and bright, but she keeps crawling, dragging herself down a trench littered with spent casings and the smell of burnt oil. Her comrades find her hours later and evacuate her under sniper fire to a makeshift field hospital near Balaclava. Doctors argue she's too valuable to lose. Within days, she's on a hospital ship heading east, sedated, her uniform still crusted with blood and dirt. Left behind, in the chaos, are the ruins of her observation post and her logbook. When German soldiers later comb through the debris, they find the small, battered notebook hidden beneath a floor tile. Inside are pages written in neat Cyrillic script. Dates, coordinates, ranks, confirmed kills. One officer flips through the entries, counting aloud in disbelief. 309, 310, 312. He pauses. Eine Frau, he mutters. A woman. The others laugh nervously, unsure if it's a Soviet trick. But the numbers don't lie. Word spreads through the German command like wildfire. Reports speak of a female marksman, Lyudmila Pavlichenko, responsible for more confirmed kills than entire platoons. Shock turns to unease. They begin broadcasting propaganda calling for her death. But Lyudmila, recovering from her wounds, doesn't hear their voices. She dreams only of the front line, the faces she's lost, the silence after the shot. Her war is not yet over, but the myth of Lady Death has already begun. By the autumn of 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's name had crossed oceans. Soviet newspapers printed her photograph beside her kill count, 309 confirmed with dozens more unverified. To many, she was a symbol of defiance. To others, a weapon of morale. When Joseph Stalin's advisors proposed sending her abroad as part of a goodwill mission, she hesitated. She didn't see herself as a hero, but the war demanded symbols as much as it demanded soldiers. She traded her mud-streaked uniform for a clean officer's tunic and stepped onto a transport ship bound for the United States, the first Soviet soldier, male or female, to visit the White House during the war. In Washington, D.C., under the blinding flash of cameras, she stood beside Eleanor Roosevelt. The First Lady smiled. Lyudmila nodded politely, her face unreadable. Inside, she still heard the echo of artillery. At rallies across America, crowds gathered to see her. Some doubted the stories until she spoke. Her voice was firm, measured, heavy with the blunt truth of a soldier. Gentlemen, she told a hall of reporters in Chicago, I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist invaders. Do you not think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long? The room fell silent. That line would make headlines across the world. It wasn't bravado, it was fatigue, a challenge, and a plea. The Americans saw courage. The Soviets saw propaganda. But for Lyudmila, it was simply memory turned to words. As the applause roared, she stood still, her posture military, her eyes distant, seeing not the stage, but the smoking ruins of Sevastopol, where her story had been written in blood and silence. By 1943, Lyudmila Pavlichenko returned home to a Soviet Union deep in its struggle for survival. The Red Army pushed westward now, reclaiming cities that had once been lost, but her war on the front line was over. The wound in her shoulder never fully healed, and the doctors ordered her off combat duty. For a woman who had lived in the crosshairs for nearly 2 years, peace felt foreign, almost suffocating. She was reassigned as an instructor at a sniper training school near Moscow. Young recruits, barely 18, would line up before her, nervous and wide-eyed, whispering her name like a prayer. She moved among them quietly, correcting postures, steadying hands, repeating the same words: patience, breath, distance. Never shoot from anger. In her voice, there was no pride, only experience. Each bullet, she reminded them, carried a piece of one's soul. At night, when the camp went silent, she'd sit by the window of her barracks, her rifle disassembled on the table before her. She would polish the worn steel, tracing the faint marks carved into its stock. Each one represented a life taken, and in the stillness, she wondered whether the ledger could ever truly balance. Outside, the war thundered on Stalingrad, Kursk, the long road to Berlin. Her students would go on to fight, to kill, to die, carrying her lessons into the rubble of Europe. And though she no longer pulled the trigger, her shadow lingered on every battlefield where a Soviet sniper waited in silence. In the eyes of the enemy, she had become more than a soldier. She was a ghost, a symbol that haunted their trenches long after she had vanished from the front. May 1945. The war ends, but for Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the silence feels heavier than the gunfire ever did. Moscow erupts in celebration. Flags wave, songs rise, champagne spills in the streets, but she stands at her window, watching the fireworks reflect off the glass like tracer rounds. The world calls her a hero, yet she feels the quiet ache of those who never returned. Her official record stands at 309 confirmed kills, the highest ever recorded by a female sniper. Medals line her chest. Hero of the Soviet Union, Order of Lenin, Order of the Red Banner. But behind the decorations lies a woman who carries the weight of every name not written in her notebook, the comrades lost, the faces that flickered in her scope before the pull of a trigger. In interviews, she smiles politely, her voice calm and measured. But in private, the nightmares linger. The hiss of shells, the whistle of bullets, the echo of her own rifle. She turns to teaching history, returning to the books she once studied before the war. In the classroom, her students know little of the woman behind the uniform. They see only a lecturer, not the sniper who once brought fear to the Wehrmacht. Years later, she meets Eleanor Roosevelt again, this time in Moscow. Two women, survivors of a world consumed by men's wars, sit together in quiet conversation. No speeches, no cameras, just silence and memory. As she grows older, her eyesight fades, but her composure never does. When asked if she regretted the life she took up, she simply answers, "I only regret that I could not do more to stop them sooner." Her records still sit in military archives, pages of neat Cyrillic script that once shocked Nazi officers. Yet for Lyudmila Pavlichenko, those records were never about glory. They were about endurance, about defending what was left when everything else had burned away. The woman who came to be known as Lady Death never sought the title. She only wanted her country to live.